freedom to send money anywhere for free? What if there were no fees, wait times, or restrictions limiting how much money you can send or to whom? Storecoin is building a public blockchain that can be used by anyone, individuals like you and me, developers, and local merchants. Bitcoin found a way to secure transactions on the blockchain, but it has a problem. Proof of work is very wasteful, expensive, and slow. Storecoin is solving these problems. With our dynamic proof-of-stake protocol, computers will work together efficiently in a pipelined fashion to validate transactions, instead of competing and wasting energy. This allows many more transactions per second while still being as decentralized as Bitcoin. Storecoin will be easy to build on top of, enabling the rapid development of Web C apps, web and mobile apps powered by the zero-fee Store cryptocurrency. App developers everywhere can pay you Store tokens when you sign up, invite your friends, take key actions, and more. Developers can also accept Store for zero-fee payments. When you send or receive transactions, there are no fees, which is great for people worldwide and lets micropayments scale globally. Plus, Storecoin will feature an evolutionary blockchain governance. Our checks and balances-based system will allow an unlimited number of stakeholders around the world to reach consensus on new features, nonprofit leadership, and monetary policy. Storecoin adoption will start with app developers using Store to incentivize usage. They'll also accept Store for in-app payments. Then, it will power smart contracts. Finally, the Store token becomes the first-ever zero-fee form of payment accepted at cash registers around the world, competing in the $21 trillion market of Visa-like payments and beyond. We are on a journey to expand global commerce and trade, one zero-fee transaction at a time. Storecoin.
My name is Rag. I'm the CTO of Storecoin. So why we exist? In the panel discussion yesterday, I think the topic was golden age of ICOs. One of the panelists mentioned that the Bitcoin transaction fee earlier this year was more than the monthly salary of most people in Africa. So the transaction fees create what we call as a demand-side friction. It is unsustainable for merchants and developers, especially when the transaction amount is much less than the transaction fee, as it happens in most of the small transactions. So this is the problem we are trying to solve. And how big is the market? If you look at the opportunity, it's the global transfer market, the credit card industry, which is 5.5 trillion in the US alone and over 21 trillion globally. So we are not saying we are going to, rebuild this huge market, but that's a big market to address with zero transaction fee, truly censorship resistance cryptocurrency. So how do we do it? What's the solution? So we are going to replace the transaction fees with inflationary block reward. What that means is the Storecoin distribution partners who will help secure the network with validating the transactions in the block, they will get the block rewards in the form of Store tokens instead of the transaction fees. That's basically how they make money. And the yearly inflation is kept very low. It's up to 2%, so we are not really having a highly inflationary token system. And secondly, the decentralized economic model, we require that all the nodes participate in securing the network, and return all the nodes will actually are eligible for block rewards. So there is no competition in the system. And finally, we want to have the low barrier to entry for the developers and merchants, which means we don't want to have a DApp or a smart contract-based platform where you are required to develop the application to work with an environment. We want to enable your existing desktop, mobile, or web apps to crypto-enable that with the Web C initiative, what we call as Web C initiative. So you can actually make use of the payment platform and re-enable your application to run on our platform. So this is a big question, decentralization. It's one of the most abused words in crypto industry. Just like the word diet, maybe like, everybody's dieting, but nobody's losing any weight. Similarly, decentralization all over the place, and nobody defines what decentralization is. In our years worth of research, we realized that you cannot solve decentralization purely with technology. It's impossible to do that. You need the economics and the governance work together with technology to solve the decentralization problem. So decentralization is not just a number of nodes in the system as typically it is defined, but it also needs to have the other two arms to to realize the decentralization. So Storecoin, our protocol called dynamic proof of stake. It's dynamic because the protocol parameters vary based on various conditions on the network, and the dynamic proof of stake protocol actually embeds all the three the pillars to ensure decentralization. On the technology side, we believe that any leader or delegation-based protocols will end up being, they have a tendency towards centralization. So we want to avoid it altogether to minimize their chances of centralization. And similarly, on the economic side, like I mentioned before, we want all the validators to participate in securing the network, and in return, they all are eligible for the block rewards for every single block. So there is a cooperation instead of competition, which basically, again, avoids creating the validator pools, which get bigger and bigger, and then that also has centralization tendency. And finally, the on-chain governance. You may have heard about recent voting on Ethereum to bring down the block reward from 3 to 2 ETH. The decision was taken by the core development team. There is no on-chain governance model, and we want to avoid that. And so from the very onset, we want to have the governance built into the blockchain itself rather than having it as an afterthought. So how do we do that? So how does Storecoin address these three pieces, the technology, economics, and governance? So we visualize our network slightly differently from how traditionally the blockchain network is visualized. We think of it as a two-tiered network consisting of an outer validator nodes, which validate the transactions, obviously, as the name suggests. And then there is there could be thousands of such nodes in the network. And then there is a relatively smaller number of message nodes, which basically take care of the persistence and the data security and so on. And the two networks are linked with cryptographic, secure cryptographic process. So either of the node types cannot do any malicious act, such as reversing a transaction or double spending or censoring a transaction, for example. So together, it allows us to have a really large number of validator nodes, which is one of the metrics for decentralization. This also avoids the typical quadratic message complexity that is associated with typical blockchains, and we should be able to handle a large number of validator nodes with this architecture. And in terms of the protocol itself, the algorithm itself, we call it BlockFin. It's the underlying consensus algorithm that assembles the blocks and validates the block. Again, we want to eliminate the waste. Typically, you may have heard about chain forks, which is standard across all blockchains. We want to minimize that waste by actually having an empty blockchain, a chain of empty blocks created at inception, so the security and its integrity is guaranteed. And then as the transactions come in, these blocks get filled with the transactions, and the blocks will go through a multi-stage validation process. This allows us to minimize the waste by by obviously, there is no possibility of chain forks, so there is no waste. But more importantly, it allows us to process the blocks in a parallel and pipelined process, which allows us to have a large throughput, even when we have large number of validator nodes in the network. As you can see in the diagram, it's a multi-stage process. There are blocks that are already validated and secured. So the transactions contained in the green boxes are confirmed, so they are finalized. And then there are some blocks that are still under validation, but everyone, including the clients who sent the transaction, could know the stage at which their transactions are, where their transactions are, and what stage the validation stage is. And then there are like empty blocks waiting for transactions to be filled in. This is slightly different from the traditional way where the miners or the validators create the block privately and then push it to the blockchain for validation. And in terms of the economics, what's our magic? As I mentioned before, zero transaction fees are paid for by the up to 2% yearly inflation. And we call something like work to earn. There is no competition, like there is no leader or a delegate to create the block. Everyone participates in validating the block. That means everyone, all the validators are eligible for every block reward for every block. And then that makes it, there is no advantage in defeating the system. You cannot create a block faster than others, so there is no reason to defeat the system. And in terms of the governance, we have different worker nodes for different responsibilities. And one of the important things for us is core developers don't call the shots, which is typically the case with most projects. And then the on-chain governance with checks and balances, because there are different worker types, different for different responsibilities. So you have the checks and balances built into the blockchain itself. This is our timeline. We started late last year in terms of our research, because what we are doing is something different from rest of the industry in terms of leaderless consensus algorithm, economic and governance built into the blockchain. So we are planning to launch the Storecoin sometime next year with a high throughput and a fairly decent number of validators, where the validators go through the KYC AML. So we conform to any regulatory requirements. And in the growth phase, we will actually have up to 20K validators. It's a fairly decentralized with a fairly high throughput. And that's when the programmable P2P APIs will be made available, so that we can actually have the Web C initiative come in. And then in the maturity, we will actually have these smart contracts built in. And our final eventual goal is to get into the cash register. But in order to do that, we need to be able to handle the chargebacks. And that's a big problem with the blockchain system. And that's why that's an eventual goal for us. And this is the team. You can go to storecoin/team to get the bio of all the members. But more, the one thing that I want to highlight is all execs have 8-year token vesting. So we are here for the long shot. And in terms of the ICOs, we shied away from any public ICOs. We actually had milestone-based private token sales. And that's the mode we want to continue for a while, because that keeps us honest, and the token buyers know what we promise and what we deliver. And we want to go that route until we are ready to show some big progress for the larger audience. And that's the end of my talk, and thanks for staying.